I'm Sarah Lehman, and I'm just like a very loyal Londoner who is a part of a really cool grassroots community called London United for Change. And so I'm really excited to get people really engaged in local municipal politics, because I find grassroots like action is really where we're at and where we can make really systemic long-term change in London and our community, and it's amazing. And they all know already, that's why they're here. So I'm super stoked. So I would love to introduce our panel tonight. So our first panelist, who's amazing, I'm sorry, everyone's amazing here, is Councillor Hadley McAlister. He's representing Ward 1 currently, woo! Which includes a very amazing mix of both rural and urban communities, low and high income, offering him a really front row view of the city's range of priorities and challenges. Next to him, who's already been introduced, is Councillor Skylar Franke, who is currently representing Ward 11. Yay! So many of you know, obviously, a past Urban League president, years of environmental and community leadership in this community, including her time at the London Environment Network and Reforest London too. And next to her, last but not least, is the incredible Maureen Cassidy. She is a former city councillor and now the CEO of Pillar Nonprofit Network, and she brings an incredible dual perspective on public service and community impact. Now, before I toss them to the wolves, I really would love to give an opportunity for Sandy Levin to come forward. We're going to explore a lot of themes tonight, and I really want to give Sandy Levin an offer a few opening remarks. He's an incredible voice of civic engagement in this community, and also a past city councillor as well. So please come forward, Sandy. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Sarah. Thanks, everybody, for coming. I'm Sandy Levin, as mentioned, former city councillor, president of the Orchard Park Sherwood Forest Neighborhood Association, and actually used to be a president of Urban League. The panel today is to help carry on a discussion about city council election that, frighteningly, is less than a year away from today, October 26th, 2026. And frankly, my view is this upcoming election should be the focus of the Urban League over the next 12 months. The question really boils down to, do you care about who's on city council? If you care, then what are you going to do about it? Are you thinking of running? Are you helping people who are running? That's time. That might even mean money. But the people you want to support need your support. And one of the things we need to do collectively, get the turnout over 25%. So, wow. Yeah. So some of these questions, hopefully our panel is going to address tonight. But as I mentioned, it's a year-long slog, and hopefully everybody in the room will be involved in some way, shape, or form. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. I'm going to sit because I know I can project while I'm sitting too, and also I don't like lording over you folks. So we're just going to jump right in. I'm very excited. So for the three of you, as we look ahead to 2026, what topics or issues do you see at the front line of the next election, and what might define the next election as we come up to it? Anyone is welcome to start, and this is not, again, this is just for our friend with the camera. Makes us look really amazing.
Yeah.
Who would like to go?
Maureen looked like she wants it. Yeah, you raised her hand.
Yeah.
It doesn't amplify, so you have to yell.
It's just for, okay. I've got yeah, I can project too. Obviously, you know, housing and people that are living unhoused or precariously housed, like those are in my view, that's what's going to define the next election. You know, I'm not sure about 2022 because I kind of checked out a little bit. It was retired. But 2018 was definitely about the rapid transit question. And I still have that fight with people to this day, whether or not it's a good thing. And I won't relive past fights, but housing and homelessness and the folks that are living unhoused on our streets, like the numbers that we saw when I first took office, we were alarmed. And it's not even close. Like, it has grown exponentially every year since then. The pandemic saw a huge jump. And it's just in people's faces. They are seeing the folks that are struggling and suffering on our streets. And connected to that is getting housing built. And so how is City Council doing that and ensuring that they're getting housing built at every income level? So we're seeing a lot of, high rises going up downtown. We're seeing a lot of luxury apartments and condos. We're seeing this big push from the development community to expand the urban growth boundary. Expanding the urban growth boundary is not going to get people that are unhoused into housing. And the idea of the trickle-down effect, which has been, I don't even think they're talking about that anymore. I think they have shame now if they were to bring that.
Call it supply.
Yeah. It's bull crap, and everybody knows it. So, so we have to get affordable housing built. We have to get fully supported housing built. And I think that those are the things that, and people might frame it differently depending on where they sit in the spectrum politically or where they sit in the spectrum of privilege. It's obvious, and it's in people's faces that this is a problem. And so I think that that's going to define the next election.
Yeah, I'm going to agree. Homelessness, definitely. And it was number one at the door in 2022. I think it'll also be the property tax increases, because over the last 4 years, we have increased it substantially. So recognizing that is a lot of people are suffering with an affordability crisis. And so how are we able to explain the increases and what we're spending it on? Additionally, I'd also say normally the day-to-day stuff, like, it doesn't seem like it is the number one issue. When you are canvassing, most people want to know, is my garbage getting picked up? Is my snow removal happening? Like, that's probably about half the doors want to make sure that the services that they're paying for are happening. So I'd say kind of a combination of those three usually would be at the top. But of course you always have, I have what I want to talk to people at the door about, but it might not come up. So I'd probably say those might be the top three we're seeing.
I agree with everything that's already been said. To the property tax thing, I would say part of that is where people want to see the money spent. Obviously, the police was the big one everyone talked about. And so, I already hear about where people want that money allocated. So in terms of anyone, thinking of running, kind of look at the budget. There was a great infographic that a number of people have posted in terms of the percentage breakdowns and where the money in the budget goes to and what services. So it's kind of a helpful thing to kind of refer to. And then maybe when you're, campaigning or working on a campaign, looking at that. Again, I would say housing, homelessness, those are two big ones. We heard it last election, and I think those are still two big topics. But I'd also say I still think transit's a big one. We've talked about it a lot during the council. It was a real fight in terms of getting more money for that. But that's definitely a service where it's underfunded. You could say that to a number of them. Even the library really fought to get an increase as well. But I would say, transit's up there as well. And part of that is infrastructure. I know it feels like we're in never-ending construction season, but there are always big projects on the horizon. And I think if you're, in whatever part of the city you're in, looking at where those projects are, some of them are related to rapid transit. Some of them are just, long-standing ones that kind of need to happen with all the underground infrastructure. But those are ones I always hear about too. And I think they're always kind of election topics.
Okay. The only thing I want to add is just when you said transit, in relation to that, I think traffic. And so people want to know that they can get somewhere faster. Again, I think we have all different solutions on how we do that, but traffic comes up a lot as well. Oh, you want more? Okay, sorry.
We're taking over, Sarah. Just talking about the budget. I think a sleeper that might not be on people's radar is back to the police budget. So they did that big increase, 8% or 5% out of an 8% increase was police. They've tried their best to backtrack out of that they're giving some back. Like if you talk to Josh, and I've talked to Josh, he'll say a number of things, but they're actually making adjustments and this sort of thing. What they might not realize is where the high voter turnouts are, generally the west end of the city, generally affluent areas of the city. What I heard, because I run in conservative circles and I have a lot of conservative friends, and that's where the highest voter turnout is amongst that population. They were super ticked off about the police budget in particular. And I think the mayor may have underestimated or overestimated the stereotypical support for police that comes from the conservative side of the spectrum. I've heard from a number of sources that they were super ticked off about the police budget in particular. I sat on the police service budget with Ed Holder, very conservative guy. He would have never supported a budget like that coming from the board. As a member of the police services board, he would never have supported a budget like that. So I think that may be something that, because they're not activists, they're not out there like marching in the streets saying we don't support this budget. I think there is a quiet disgruntlement that if there is a viable alternative running against the incumbent mayor, that might be something that could be trouble.
Back to you.
I love that. I want to dive in there, but I'm gonna pull back too. So how do you folks, all three of you in general, how do you think the decisions about urban growth and planning in our city influence affordability and sustainability? You talked a little bit about the urban growth boundary, and we see, there's a huge population increase happening in London. I believe we were the fourth fastest growing city in Canada in 2024 or 2025. I can't remember. No, we're in 2025, 2024 or something. So we're going to see obviously that need to increase and grow. But how do we then also balance sustainability and affordability for the people that we want to keep in our community and not push those lower folks out? Yeah.
I'll go first this time. So the urban growth boundary is still underway, the review for it. It'll get final approval in December. At this point, we are adding 1,476 hectares of prime agricultural land to our urban growth boundary, and we are staying within the city limits. So like the image that everyone has in front of them of the city, we're staying within those limits, but we're essentially punching out areas in the north, west, southwest, a little bit in the southeast, of where there can be residential development to occur. I have been mostly against urban growth boundary expansion because predominantly it just increases the land value 5.5 to 8 times for the people who own the land existingly. And there's this narrative around if we add it in somehow that will make the land cheaper, and then the developers will transfer those land savings to the new build. But my argument has always been a developer is going to build a house, and if someone will buy it for $700,000, they're going to sell it for $700,000, not going to market it for $300,000. So we've had lots of debates over the last year about this at council. I've also tried to bring in a agricultural offset policy. So for every hectare of land that we take out of production, we save a hectare of land somewhere else. That lost 7-8, so that was a very close vote. So maybe we'll see if it can come back. But we know there's so much research that shows the more we sprawl, the harder it is for us to pay for these services. So the lower density you have, the lower your property tax base is for an area, which means that people are paying more essentially for less service because we only have so many libraries and so many members of the police force and so many aquatic centers. And it's harder to pay for that unless you have greater density, and especially with transit where you need greater density for it to be viable. We are struggling a little bit. I will say some of the policies, and this goes a little bit beyond your scope, I do think we have done a pretty good job of taking out red tape, but I personally like a lot of the infill policies we've done. So trying to orient a lot of transit oriented design along the corridors and make it easier for people to build, apartment buildings, but, higher density as of right. There is a lot of debate about some of the policies, especially right now, about 4 units as of right in single family home areas. So there's some discussion on that, but I think that the infill projects that we have really been pushing in the last 4 years will help some of the issues that we have with affordability. Again, they're not necessarily popular in every neighborhood, But I really look at infill as a way that we can keep property taxes ideally lower in the long term, because we'll have more property taxes within a smaller area. No, either one.
Do you mind if I go?
Yeah. Okay. So democratic.
Yeah, I know. We'll be doing that all night, I'm sure. Yeah, just on the point of infill, I mean, my Ward 1 actually has the least development. I find I have 2 former landfills, so if you ever tried to develop with landfills, it is its own minefield. So you can't really build in huge swaths of Ward 1 just because of what they were. But in terms of the affordability side too, when I first started, it was kind of the tail end of that big real estate boom. So you still had people coming into London. It's, the more affordable market, snapping up a lot of what would have been affordable housing, and you saw a lot of evictions. So the affordability hit us particularly hard because a lot of people were losing their homes. These people might have just been working like minimum wage jobs, but they get turfed, the rents get jacked up, and so that caused kind of a bit more of a threw fuel onto a fire of affordability. But that comes with its own set of problems. But in terms of the urban growth boundary, I'm not really seeing much of that. That's more, you're seeing a lot more of that in the northwest, in the southeast. I guess my southern boundary probably has a bit more of that. You see that in Summerside. And so that sprawl comes with its own host of problems, right? We're stretching our infrastructure to a breaking point. You have to do all the underground stuff. Nobody ever loves talking about that, but all of that costs money. We had a long debate with this council, kind of waiting on the province to make a decision about development charges and whether we had to backfill for the province. So, I mean, all of that stuff costs money. And so, as has already been said, like, I'm a proponent of the infill because I do think that addresses a lot of those issues. And we're not going to develop. If we sprawl out the city, again, that's just kind of enriching the developers, because what we've heard more recently too is that the single family model isn't even working for the private sector. They aren't building those. You're seeing many more townhouses, the stacked towns, high rises. It's more lucrative to build up even for them. So that might change it. And then even the changes with the population growth, we've seen even the province pull back on that. And so you're kind of planning for things that are already being pulled back on. So yeah, that comes with its own host of problems, but there's a lot that goes into this. I mean, I think we're doing our best in terms of trying to, do the infrastructure and the transit, but it's a tough situation. So,
we saw in my second term, a slow erosion of the London Plan. There were councillors that sat on that council that are still on this council that said right out loud, I don't care what the policy says. We can do whatever we want. Stephen Turner would push back and say, change the damn policy then. If you don't want to follow the policy, change the policy. So I think what we've seen with this council is a wholesale gutting of the London Plan. That thing was created through community engagement, like the biggest community engagement program that the City of London has ever embarked on. There were more people involved and gave some input, attended some meeting, attended some community engagement meeting at some point throughout the building of the London Plan. And that was based on the premise that urban sprawl costs money. It costs to extend services out towards the outskirts of the city and beyond. And it's much more cost effective to build inward and upward. Schools is a big example of what happens when we forget the core and move to sprawl. Is schools like Lorne Park. So this is the ridiculousness, right? So council would say, well, schools is not our jurisdiction. School boards determine where schools are built and whether a school gets closed. But it's council policies that help contribute to that. So when we allow urban sprawl and they build on greenfield, where it's cheaper to build for a time until land prices go up. So they build schools out there because that's where they've built houses out there. So that's where the young families are moving. They gut the core and they closed Lorne Park School. And some of you remember that whole debate. It happened before I joined council in 2014. Closed the school. It has been redeveloped into a park and all of that stuff. But by the time I joined city council, they had to we had to rezone some property, and I always forget the name of this school. There's a school at Quebec and Oxford. Yeah. So one of my early decisions on council was to allow the land next to that school to be rezoned so that they could build an extension on that school, because as those core areas get hollowed out, land prices get depressed. And so guess what? Families move back in. And now they need a school to go to. But Lorne Park has not only been closed, it's been demolished. And like literally the time between the last student attending school at Lorne Park and the new addition being built onto East Carling was like less than 2 years, I think, between those two things happening. Like, it took a long time for them to finally close Lorne Park, but the debate went on for quite some time. But that's what happens when we allow the city to sprawl outwards. And so the elephant in the room when it comes to not building inwards and upwards, which was the goal of the London Plan, the elephant has a name and it starts with S. And his second name starts with F. So unless we're going to do something about this conglomeration of land in one landowner's hands, over 60% of the vacant land in the core area belongs to one landowner. In the city of Montreal, they tax property taxes on vacant land on a parking lot in downtown Montreal is taxed at highest and best use. So if that empty asphalt parking lot in downtown Montreal could house a 30-story apartment building with 300 units in it, that is how they assess the property taxes on that. I've talked to city staff about what the right or the power is in Ontario. I never did get really fulsome answers. There is a certain fear about this landowner because he threatens lawsuits and things like that. Sandy probably knows this stuff inside and out. But I used to always say, why can't we do what they can do in Montreal?
I want to applaud, but that's inappropriate. So from all of that incredible information, to sum up this first theme, kind of planning for London's future, what lessons from this term in council, whether you're an active participant being on it or a part of the community who is trying to influence social change through the nonprofit world, what lessons from this term in council should inform the next council? What do you think is the most important lesson that can be taken from this term? So far, I guess. It's not over yet. We still have almost a year left. I did go first already. You got it.
Do you mean like in terms of planning or
overall? Go overarching if you think there's something real big.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very loaded question because it kind of depends on what topic you're looking at. I mean, I think it would be nice to have a bit more balanced perspective, especially with some of our committees. I think, especially when you look at like planning, and to Maureen's point, I do feel like it is very much the age of the developer right now. And I think having a more balanced perspective in terms of maybe, parts of the London Plan I do think need to be revisited. But I do think we've kind of, especially with this council, like it's just become essentially, I always joke, like even we've got Mr. Mike Wallace, who's the London Development Institute, in the gallery, constantly saying like this is what needs to happen. This is what needs to happen. But I mean, the perspective of the private sector is one area. I think the public, they need to have their input as well. There needs to be a balanced approach. The two things have to be weighed together, obviously. The issue we always run into is, we feel like we're under the gun in terms of getting housing built, right? So it's always that pressure that we need the housing, and you don't want to alienate the private sector, but at the same time, you also want people to have their say. I think the question of the neighborhoods and what they look like now, what they could be, those are all really big topics that I think warrant more discussion. And I think, especially at council, what I've seen is there is some ramming through of policies, and I think sometimes we need to slow down. We need to have that public engagement because it is really important, and it's not just on the planning side. There's a lot of topics where we need to have more of that engagement, but I think it's because so many of the issues we've been dealing with, it really feels like you're in panic a lot of the time. Like we're having to act quickly, especially when it comes to homelessness. People are constantly saying to us, like, move faster, move faster, move faster. And these plans don't happen overnight. And I think that's kind of a lesson I've learned too, is that like even on the affordable housing, for instance, whenever I talk to, say, the nonprofit sector, a lot of these projects are 4 to 5 years. So it takes time, it takes planning. There's a lot of engagement that goes on. But that's a big lesson in terms of that's work that a lot of people don't see, but it's vitally important in terms of things getting off the ground, especially on the housing side, and trying to obviously address that affordability issue because we need all types of housing built. But on the nonprofit side, supportive housing, those come with their own set of challenges, and the planning on those is vitally important. So I'll leave it there. That's a good question, maybe to come back to later on, because there's a lot that goes into it, but yeah, that's kind of just a few thoughts I have on that.
Yeah, and I probably will just add a little bit to that. So the one thing I would add is I think it would be great if the next council can do a better job listening. So I find our council, sometimes we might not even solicit community engagement on an issue, or we might, make it so that there's not enough time to give input, or even the structures or the framework where we provide input, like the survey might be super obscure and hard to follow, or all of those things. And it's actually things that before I became a city councillor always annoyed me about the city. I'm like, why is this survey formatted this way? Why was there no consultation on this issue? And even now becoming one, I can understand like where there are roadblocks, but I don't think it means we shouldn't do it or we shouldn't try harder. So I'd say I think that is continuous improvement, but I do think that we could be doing a better job. And to your point, not just at planning, but across every single committee we sit on, every major issue we have, even for example, like our salaries in the media right now that we're debating, it's going to be go to council next week. So we debated it yesterday or 2 days ago. 2 days ago, sorry, 2 days ago. And then it's going to council next Tuesday. Like how much time is that for the general public to weigh in? And yes, we did a survey and we had a task force who compiled and they had lots of discussions. But I feel like there's a difference between, and that's the other thing too, is like bookending community engagement. So doing it at the beginning where you get people's general thoughts and directions, and then doing it at the end right before you're about to make a major decision. So, and again, some people would argue that, this week is enough time for people to send an email, but it's not necessarily a robust engagement process. So I would really love, again, if both council and staff started moving towards a model where it was like deep engagement at the beginning, deep engagement at the end. So I think that's a lesson that I try to, when there are major decisions, I try to make sure people are aware of it. I try to host town halls when I can. But I think that we could be doing a better job of directly connecting with residents. Thank you.
Yeah, so that leads into what I was going to say was that apathy is bad. It's bad for democracy and it's bad for this city. And so without, the community committed to raising the voter turnout, low voter turnouts don't often lead to the best councils. So you saw people were, I would say, I've always said my hypothesis around the Fontana Council is I don't think that there would have been the uptick in voter turnout. There was a slight uptick to, I think, about from 39% to like 43 or something like that, 42, 43%. So there was a slight uptick. And I think it was the criminal charges against Joe Fontana that really spurred people on because that stuff went on from the beginning of that term of council. The first 2 years were the 0% tax increase, which some people thought, was a good thing, but it led to our infrastructure decaying and the gap between, the needs of the infrastructure getting fixed and upgraded and what we were accomplishing every year. Like that gap kept widening. And so that happened in those first 2 years of that council. And the vote division, the division on the council, the Fontana 8, that was in the first 2 years. And it was at the end of the second year that the criminal charges or the investigation all started. And that's when people really started paying attention. And there was this upswell. There was, pints and politics started happening, and people were organizing into little groups and about talking what was going on. People started going to council meetings physically in person. Now you can go to the live stream. So it's even easier for people to pay attention to what's going on. And I think that it's hard to break that apathy with everything that's going on in the world. People are feeling cynical and everything. So unless something really cataclysmic happens, I'm really an optimistic person, but I'm not optimistic about a big jump in voter turnout this time around, which is really, really too bad, because there was organization happen. There were different wards really did. Groups of people organized to make sure they had like a real viable candidate, because that's really important. I always say running for council is simple, but it's not easy. So it's super simple. You knock on every friggin' door in the ward, and you're going to finish before election day. So then you start. I called Joni Beckler up, who Joni had encouraged me to run. And I said, okay, what happens when you've knocked on every door? And she said, you start all over again. And I said, I knew you were going to say that. So it's hard work, but it's really simple. It's not complicated. You put signs on the lawn. You get people to fundraise for you. That's really important. Get people to fundraise for you. One person, candidates have done it all by themselves. Michael Van Holst did it all by himself. He spent $3,000 of his own money, and he beat Bud Polhill, who was a 25 or something more year vet of council. He'd been on council for 25 years. And even the Free Press was shocked that he got beat in that election, even though the whole Fontana 8 pretty much got wiped out. So yeah, I don't know how you get people to care. Everybody in this room cares. So how do you get your neighbors to care? They're listening to what's going on with Donald Trump. What's going on in London at your city council has a greater effect on your life today and next week and next month than anything that Donald Trump is doing. And these are really, really important decisions that are going on. Staff will do public engagement according to what is legislatively required. And staff will do public engagement based on the signals they're getting from the council of the day. So when I was still on council, they embarked on a project called Reimagining Public Engagement. The planning division tasked 2 or 3 people just to do that. How do we reimagine public engagement? Because our council, from 2014 to 2018, we were saying, we have to do this better. We have to listen to what the people are saying. We have to, it doesn't mean, Sandy calls up and says, I want you to do this. And so, yes, we got to vote the way Sandy told me to vote. That's not what listening to the public means, but it means truly listening, taking input from a vast array, diversity of opinion, and then making decisions with all of the information. But there have been councillors that I served with, and there are councillors on this council who are hostile to public engagement. And city staff follow their lead, 100%.
Unlock the building, might get a few people. And just because more, yeah. And just because Maureen mentioned it, I beat Michael Van Holst with $3,500. So please don't wait 20 years to take on councillors. I think Bud, long time there, but Michael's only there for 8 years, right? So again, yeah, like money isn't everything. Like having a good ground game is very important.
I love that. Also, only 8 years. Love that too. 8 years, very, very short amount of time. Each of you very broadly mentioned the wards, and we all know in London right now we've had a ward boundary change, and that will affect our next election in 2026. So that'll be very important because, I mean, even myself, my boundaries changed. I was once Hadley's, and now I'll be Skylar's. How fantastic and fun is that? So I really wanted to ask, and I didn't even know it was going to happen either. I wanted to ask what you folks thought about how might these new boundary changes influence councillors in terms of like their workloads, and like you folks had already talked about, resident engagement. You talked about communities and who might even choose to run in 2026. Because now some of our boundaries have completely changed, meaning that some of these incumbents that we have may not run in their same wards. So I'd love to know what your thoughts are about how it might influence councillors and who might choose to run in the future, workloads, etc. Skylar.
Okay.
I'm choosing now.
That's fine. It's fine. Yeah, I mean, so originally, and the whole reason we did the redistribution is it was people were representing different amounts of people. So the lowest area had about 28,000 people, and the highest area had 34,000 people. So, 43,000. I flipped those. 43,000. So there's a big gap, and so that got redistributed, and so now people are on average representing about 33,000 people, and that was set to grow with population growth. So I don't think it didn't materially change how many doors people are going to knock on. So in regards to like campaigning the workload, I don't see it as significantly different, other than it did force a couple of people. I think we'll see some people shifting around on the map because they're going to pick where they want to run. And again, there was a news article out 2 weeks ago. People are already saying and declaring their intentions on where they want to run or if they want to run again or not. So I think it will affect it slightly, and there'll be some areas that are either like no incumbent might be running in it, or might have two incumbents running against each other, or a combination of any of those. So I think it'll shift a bit, but based again on the article 2 weeks ago, it sounds like about 10 of us are planning to run again. So again, and some might be against each other. So I think it'll be interesting. I mean, if you like politics, I assume you all do because you're here. I always find it to be exciting when there's multiple candidates that could win. I think it makes for a better race. I think it makes it more engaging. I think it makes it more exciting. So I'm really hopeful that in the next year's election, we see some stellar candidates like across the board.
So I think this council, actually, there's quite a few councillors that don't live in the ward that they represent right now. So I don't know if it will affect their decision. They don't live in their ward right now, so who knows? I think it's right to the redistribution was it was the right time to do it. I know there had been calls in the past to do like a mini adjustment just in Ward 7 back when the mayor was a councillor there, and we knew that this was coming up, this review of the ward boundary. So we resisted that call to just do a tweak. But having that distribution of population means each vote counts equally across the city, but it doesn't translate into how hard a councillor works. The work that a councillor does, so they all have support staff, and I think the ratio of support staff to councillors is better than it has ever been. When I first was elected, there were 7 councillors to 1 support staff. And so gradually we increased that over the years. So I think they have a better model now. Other cities do things differently. And I remember we often looked at Hamilton when I was on council, saying like each councillor has their own support staff in Hamilton. They're not sharing. And there's such turnover in the admin staff at city council that it's really, really hard to get into a good working groove, because they've set it up so that these people that do amongst the hardest work at City Hall are already at the ceiling of how far they can go career-wise. This is like, they have to know a little bit about everything in every division in City Hall. They have to direct constituents that are calling in appropriately and help them. So they have to have such knowledge. They're dealing often with disgruntled, angry people, and they're amazing. And yet they're at the ceiling. And so other divisions in City Hall poach those people away, and they go because they have upward mobility in other areas.
It's not because of councillors.
No, they don't even, they say no to councillors, and sometimes they should. But the councillors are not their boss. They report to the clerk's office. So, I had, times where I had to go fight with the city clerk to say, I asked my staff to do this and I want them to do this, and I would have to justify my request because she didn't think it fit or whatever. I usually won those arguments because I had a good relationship with Kathy. But that support model is weird, but the support staff do a big bunch of that interaction with constituents. So population is not what differentiates the workload of each councillor. Each councillor can decide to serve on committees or not, and then outside boards and commissions that councillors are expected to serve on. Like I served on the Police Services Board and the Board of Health at the same time for a few years. And then you have another councillor who served on one water board, which meets quarterly, and they get lunch. They get lunch.
We don't get lunch anymore.
And sometimes, those meetings would be done in 15 minutes. Well, I would be like 5 or 10 minutes late when I was on one of the water boards. I'd get there and they were like, oh, we just adjourned. Like literally 5 or 10 minutes late. And the meeting would already be done. And there's one councillor who only serves on a water board. So I've argued with certain councillors when the salaries were being discussed, and I've said, you must put it in your council procedure bylaw or something, and you must enforce it, that they have to sit in on at least 2 standing committees at some point during a term of council, because there's only so many standing committees, so not everybody has to serve on 2. But at one point, Jesse Helmer was serving on 3 standing committees. So there has to be some fairer distribution of the actual workload that they're doing outside of council chambers, and salaries need to be at least like based on the actual work they're doing, rather than Councillor A is making the same as Councillor B, but really is doing the bare minimum. So justify your salary.
My hot take on this, again, just as Maureen mentioned it, I do live in my ward. I'm actually smack dab right in the middle now, especially with the changes. Actually, some of the both. And actually, Skylar ended up getting a bit of mine. So Ward 1 kind of had an odd western. Whoever gets elected, yes. But the western boundary was Wellington, which was always strange to me because it crossed multiple different boundaries. So like federally, provincially, and locally is totally different places. So it was always confusing for everyone. And that stretch always called themselves Old South adjacent, which I thought was funny. But with the distribution, what I think is really interesting is I kind of worry in a way, because if you look at what changed in terms of, you used to have 1, 4, 13, and 11 as kind of the core 4, and now we've gone down to 3. So my worry, because I'm very passionate about a lot of these issues, and there's a lot of social issues, especially in the core area, that we need to work on. But when you have 3 councillors, it's very frustrating at times when you get outvoted on a lot of things. And I think we can make progress on stuff. But with the way the ward boundaries now flesh out, I'm really hoping that the suburbs also come to the table with ideas and, some recognition that there are in certain other parts of the city, but kind of on the fringes, to be honest with you. But there are issues in the core that need to be dealt with. And so I really hope, anyways, for the next council that, that there's a recognition of that, because that's a worry I have. Anyways, just losing another seat in that reshuffle. Somebody the other day actually referred to the way the new Ward 1 is designed. So it's the 2026, you can see with 1, they called it the hammer, which I actually really liked because I'm just off of Hamilton Road, and I was like, I do like that. I like that Ward 1's the hammer of the wards. I don't like that it's nailing Ward 4, but...
Say 14.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's actually the race to watch, because 4 is completely new. It's a mash of 2 wards. That's going to be a really interesting one to watch. So, I mean, if anyone's thinking, I mean, that's kind of there for the taking. There's not really anyone, right? Because it's brand new if you think about it. So yeah, that's kind of my take. In terms of the workloads, I would say it's all vastly different. Honestly, a lot of my workload, I'm dealing with the social issues a lot in terms of, like, I would say Ward 1, Ward 4, there's a lot of similarities. So when OEV got redistributed into Ward 1, there are a lot of similarities with Hamilton Road, what Dundas deals with. So I think we can learn from each other in a lot of ways. So yeah, I think that's interesting. But with the workloads, like, I feel sometimes like I'm doing a lot. I know David feels like that. Susan has a different view on things. But in terms of the issues we're dealing with, it's a workload that is a lot, to be honest with you, and very niche in terms of what we're dealing with in the core. Because I talk to some of my other colleagues, and they'll come to council and they'll listen about it, but they're not living it. And I think there has to also be that recognition that certain wards are living with some of this stuff and others really aren't. So just as a thought on that, and I'll give it back to Sarah.
Perspective. I love it. I have 40 more questions, but we don't have time, which is really upsetting for me. So since we only have about 3 more minutes, I'm going to ask a very fun, easy, no, it's not going to be a fun or easy one. Let me see. Ooh, I want people to be excited about running. And I want people in this room to get excited about running, because anybody in this room could run for municipal council in 2026. Anybody could do it. I think it's $100 and 25 signatures. From what I remember 4 years ago, it could be increasing. So what I'd like to ask is, from your perspectives, because we've already talked about workload, how can we make running for council more accessible to people from diverse backgrounds and income levels, for, say, anybody in this room? I think policy, but what do you guys think? Right. Oh, I love that.
I mean, I think some things are out of our control, but I agree. Rank ballots would be the best thing we could do. But I mean, I think it depends on who you, so my argument for the salary increase, because it's in the media right now, is that I would like to see more candidates run. And I think that there are a lot of, I really like the role. I enjoy it. I enjoy liaising with constituents, responding to emails, doing town halls, doing these kinds of events. But I think a lot of people are intimidated or scared off from doing this role. And so in order to effectively incentivize people to actually put their name on a ballot and do the work of campaigning and do the work of running. I know Sandy's shaking his head over there. I think that people need to get paid more if they want to do it. If they have, if they're on a single income and they, aren't able to make $70K a year work for their household. So again, different perspectives on it. But to me, like, if you're a single mom and you have one income and you can't make it work on 70, if you're making 93, maybe you could, and maybe you could justify it. I do hear the concerns that, because, we also serve with people on council who do some more work and some people do less work. And so there's difficulty with that for sure. And we're still struggling with ways to try and make sure people serve equitably. One of them being, including a policy, you have to serve on 3 external ABCs, agencies, boards, and commissions, as well as you have to serve on a certain number of standing committees. So we are trying to enshrine in policy the workload distribution. Ranked ballots would have been fabulous if we could have kept them. I think that probably would have been a big game changer. And I think just in general, the way people speak to everyone in society is like kind of downgraded significantly. But even with politicians, I think even just the day-to-day conversation people have between each other or online can be pretty demeaning and aggressive and sometimes bordering on harassment. So I think if everyone did a bit better job of trying to be like, totally welcome anyone's input, negative or positive, but like there's no need to go to the level that some people are. And so I would say if we could get better handle on how people are treated in office, it like that to me is one of the things I hear people not wanting to go through. So if we could address that and make people feel like I can do this job without, my mental health cratering, I think we'd see more candidates from different backgrounds.
Good point. Thanks. I saw a diminishment in how we not necessarily treated each other. The pandemic really affected how council interacted when we spent 2 years doing virtual meetings. So it makes a big difference passing a colleague in the hall and saying, hey, how was the weekend? Or how are your kids doing? Like that sort of thing. Like you humanize each other. And so being virtual for 2 years really had an effect on my last term of council. But as far as like what barriers there are, I always fought. So one of the first things we did when I was elected in 2014 is we tightened up the councillor expense policy. So the outgoing council could hold in an election year or any year, but they did it in an election year. They'd hold their expenses for the entire year. So it looked like if you're comparing how much councillors have spent of their expense account through the year. Oh, look at these councillors. They had zero expenses. And then they would file them all after the election day in an election year. And there were 4 councillors. 1 councillor owned a tire store. And those 4 councillors, so they could expense repairs on their cars. They expensed brand new tires for 4 different councillors. And that expense went through after election day. So we really tightened up the expense policy. In the next term of council, there were some councillors that wanted to tighten it up further. So we had introduced a travel stipend, and you could choose to do a mileage thing and get your mileage reimbursed, or have a bus pass, or just get a simple travel stipend every month added to your regular stipend. And there were some councillors that pushed back against that. And then because of the pandemic, they started covering councillors' Wi-Fi at home because we had to have our meetings virtually. So we had to upgrade. Some of us had to upgrade our Wi-Fi and all of that. So when people started pushing back on those kinds of expenses, my argument was that what barriers are we creating for the single parent that wants to run for council? The job shouldn't cost people money. They're already giving, like they're people that really believe in what they're doing. They're giving their heart and soul to this job. The people, like I saw my role as 2 things: public service, 100%. Customer service. Like I've worked in customer service in my life, in my career. And I saw that aspect of it. I am a customer service representative for the City of London, and I'm serving my constituents, and my goal should be to give the best service that I can give to my constituents. There are people that run for City Council that see themselves as a VIP. I get free tickets to this or that or the other. I get invited to all these great events, and people call me Councillor. They don't call me Maureen. They say, oh, Councillor, can you do this? Oh, Councillor, you sit up here in the front. That's garbage and bullcrap. I've really cleaned up my language for this. But like, I would flip that around and say, no, you're a customer service representative. Your job is to serve the people of London. And so coming at it from that perspective, but also making it as accessible as possible for all income levels. The original City Council of the City of London 100 and something years ago was wealthy people who possibly were retired, and this is what they did in their retirement, but they had accumulated personal wealth, and so now they had the privilege and the time and the luxury to make the decisions and so they were making the decisions for all of the people of London, no matter what their income levels were. I think to have a true diversity of opinion on City Council, we have to have as much diversity as possible. And so remove those barriers. And that's what council should be looking at when they're setting policies to make it easier for people to run. What are the barriers that exist for the people that aren't in the room? Who's not in the room? Who's not on this council? Who's not making these decisions? And why aren't they here?
All right.
Sorry, Hadley.
That's okay. I mean, tough acts to follow. I'll take a different direction with this. Just kind of as some closing thoughts for people thinking of running. One of the things that I've noticed, especially, is the civility in politics has really gone down a lot. And I can't even tell you the number of times people have said to me, you know, I just wouldn't want your job. I'll be honest with you, I've heard that a number of times, and it's a shocking thing. You take, I don't know if I could say this, but you take a lot of shit, to be honest with you. Rory's here. Oh, I'm sorry, Skylar's kid's back there. Sorry, Rory. I should have said earmuffs before. But I really think, that's a big barrier. I've noticed in terms of even people I talked to in the past who were thinking of running, the state of politics is not great. I think it's Marianne Ward. She's the mayor of Burlington, and she started this campaign, Mead Ward, sorry. This campaign, I can't remember what it's called, but essentially it's a pledge to keep it clean in terms of the campaign you run. And I really think that that's important because when you're running, I think that there should be ground rules in terms of everybody runs a clean, respectful campaign. You should all be on the same playing field. And that's what I think is attractive with local is you're coming at this as individuals, and you can build your own team, bring your own ideas to these kind of forums. I also applaud the Urban League because I think doing the debates during the election is a great way to kind of even that playing field because everyone gets the same audience, which is great. But yeah, I think that those are kind of some things that could be done in terms of the barriers. I also I would have liked to have seen ranked ballots stay. I think an interesting idea that we've never tried in London too is if you didn't have signs. I don't know if we would ever do that, but I think that that's just an added expense because honestly, I think you can run grassroots campaigns and knocking on the doors, as we've said, having just that ground game is really important, but signs are this added expense, which I do think puts some people out of the running because it's difficult, right? I think people still judge based on signs, visibility. That can be a barrier in itself too. So I don't know if we'll ever get there. People go crazy with signs, by the way, in London. You get so many complaints about where the signs are. So if you are thinking of running, be prepared for a lot of complaints about signs.
The City of London provides training on where you are allowed to place signs during elections. They give you an entire workbook about it, and it's available for free at the city. I know because I've picked one up myself before. And it's true, there are a lot of rules. As we close up, because I know we're running and I apologize, I really want to thank our panelists this evening, Maureen, Cassidy, Skylar Franke, Hadley McAlister, for their time. And to everyone who joined for the panel, I'd really like to invite my friend Brandon Samuels just to speak really amazingly quickly about London United for Change, which is the group I am also a part of, but he is a much more incredible member than me. So just to talk about who we are.
That's not fair. That's a lot of pressure. I'll keep this brief. It's so nice to see you folks here. This is a community of people who care about our municipal politics, and that's what it takes to win an election. We're a grassroots group called London United for Change. We're just volunteers that meet around once a month, starting to meet hopefully a little bit more frequently as we're getting into crunch mode. I'm wearing a special pin today, and it says, "What are we waiting for?" And that is the attitude we should be having right now because, as Sadly mentioned, we have less than a year. And so if you are thinking about running a campaign yourself, if you're thinking about I want to elect people to council who reflect my values, we want to hear from you. There's work for everybody at the table. So I've got a sign-up sheet here. We're hoping to offer more programming like this, including practical resources and skills development in the coming months. So please stay tuned. And thanks again for being here tonight.
And I will pass it back over to you, my friend. And thank you so much for Urban League for hosting London United for Change tonight. We really appreciate you folks helping us be a part of this evening. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for the information provided to our panels, to our members here tonight. And I can see councillors sitting now in this crowd tonight because they'll be running in the next election coming. So Unfortunately, we couldn't pose some questions to the panelists tonight, but I think we're going to hold that for the next time during the debate. We'll allow you to ask some questions. Thank you very much for coming, and we always appreciate you coming back again.